This video is to help you put together that first full draft that you're going to need to turn in this week. In this video, I'm really going to focus on looking at samples of papers on some of the topics or similar topics that you're writing on right now. And I'm going to focus on looking at the introductions with the what, how, why thesis statements, as well as the different subject headings that students might use to discuss these topics, and finally the idea of synthesizing sources. Now you'll need to read my email that discusses what we're going to do with that extra assignment, the synthesizing sources draft. We're actually going to just meld that into this full draft that you'll be turning in. So you won't have to do two separate drafts there, but I will be looking for that synthesis in your paper. So we're going to focus on those things. So what I want to do first is start with, now these models will all be available to you on Canvas, so you'll be able to spend some time going through these if you want. One good idea you might do is look at the resources each student used. I know a few of you are concerned that you don't have enough sources. It is absolutely okay to look at someone else's paper and say, hey, what sources did you find that I didn't find? Now, of course, you need to go and actually find those sources. But if the student actually did a nice job leading you to that source, then you should be able to find it without a problem. So that's kind of a fun little thing that you'll be able to get from this assignment. But let's actually go to the student models. So this first model that we're looking at, this is going to be student A sample essay, and this is an essay on writing in the disciplines. So for those of you doing that first paper prompt choice, this is going to be one of the models that you're going to want to look at. Now, I apologize, I do not have any models for essay number 3 because that's actually a brand new essay topic. But there are not many of you doing that. And you can still use these as good models for these different writing strategies. Okay, so this student is actually writing about writing in the disciplines, an English 102 discipline-specific course for students in visual media. We see this student is using pretty good APA. Which is nice. We see we've got a short and sweet abstract. Of course, you can read through this. It will be available for you on our Canvas modules. Let's actually go to this introduction. So the student's title is From Words on a Page to Pictures on a Screen, Writing in Visual Media. I'm going to read this introduction for you, and then we're actually going to go through the pieces of it so you can see how you might be able to model it in your own paper. As an essential tool in communication, the practice of writing carries a great significance and is a required skill throughout almost every academic major and career. Even though the significance of writing is great throughout many career fields, its practices and uses vary between the different fields. Currently at Nevada State College, there has been a consideration put into the concept of creating English 102 classes that are major specific or that are designed with the purpose of teaching writing skills for specific disciplines such as business or biology. As an often overlooked college major, the visual media program offered at NSC could benefit greatly from an English 102 course offered specifically for its students by allowing them to gain the communication skills necessary to be successful in the visual media and arts field. It is important that NSC implements an English 102 class for visual arts majors, since it should be the responsibility of colleges and universities to prepare their students for writing and communication in the real world. Okay, so that's a pretty nice link for an introduction. It's about half a page. If you scroll through this document, you're going to see this student actually ended up writing. If you take out that cover page, let's see, their writing actually stops on 7. So actually their essay was a little bit short. It was only about 5 pages long, 5 full pages long. But let's break it down. Let's see what they did well in this introduction with their thesis statement. So if you notice, in this first sentence, they really start with this general idea of communication in the practice of writing, and this idea that communication is important across these academics and majors. But then the student starts to contextualize the argument a little bit by saying that even though they're all significant, there all different across those majors. So we've now started with this general idea, but we've contextualized it, leading us to this argument of specific writing classes for specific majors. Then the student actually poses the real life problem that this paper is geared towards, and that is this implementation of these discipline-specific English 102 courses. Then the student gives us a little further context for the specific major that he or she is writing about right now, which is visual media classes. Why visual media classes? Well, it could be that the student was a visual media student and it was personally gratifying to write about it. But actually what this student mentions is that it's important because it's an overlooked college major. It is actually I believe it's a new major at NSC. It's very, very small. It's growing, right? But so this is why the student is saying, hey, you should care about this. This is kind of important. And then the student ends with the idea that that English 102 classes need to be discipline specific because especially for these visual arts majors, because it's the responsibility of colleges and universities to prepare their students for writing and communication in the real world. So if we look at this, I'm going to take all this highlighting off. If we just want to look at the what, how, why thesis, you can take a minute to look at this and say, where is that what, how, why thesis? If you want to pause it, because I'm going to go ahead and talk about that. We really see our what right here, is that the major is often overlooked, but it could benefit from these specific classes, okay? So that's really our what. So I'm gonna do that in dark blue. All right. And then we really have this how here. How are we going to support that idea? Well, the student is going to demonstrate that these discipline-specific classes allow students to gain the necessary communication skills to be successful in the field. So I'm going to actually highlight this in a different color. I'm going to use green. I'm going to use orange. Hopefully we'll be able to see that. Make that a little bit bigger, okay? And then we turn to the why here, and this is one of my favorite strategies, is to say this is important because, and we can say that we can see that the student has done something very similar. It is important that NSC does this to prepare their students. So we see this is that why. So like, why should your reader care? And I'm going to do that in purple. So we have our what. This is the actual answer to the question. So the question was, should NSC implement these classes? The student says yes, because this is an overlooked major and it could benefit their students. Then they give us that how. So how will it benefit them, or how will they demonstrate this to be a beneficial program? That's in our yellow. And then we have this really important why, which, like I mentioned in the video on thesis statements, we often see this in the conclusion. Not as often do we see it in the thesis, but I'm really encouraging you all to put it in your thesis, or at least think about it as you write your thesis, and then make sure that you address it in the conclusion. Because it's the university and college job to prepare students for that real world experience. Now, this doesn't have to be your answer. This is this particular student's answer based on his or her research and his or her experiences and own ideas, right? So I thought this is also an example of an A paper, just to let you know that. I thought this was a pretty clear, concise, to the point introduction, okay? You can scroll through this. You can look through anything that the student has done. So you can pay special attention to these different headings that the student uses. You can look at their APA throughout. Again, I'm giving you, all the examples I'm giving you are A papers or strong papers, B+ A papers. You can see these level 1 headings followed by level 2 headings. You can also look and see the way that the reference list is formatted. It's in alphabetical order, right? We're using a strong APA writing and style. And also, like I said, if you want to look at and see how these students collected their sources, you can absolutely do that. You can go look for those same sources, or you can just use them as ideas for how to collect more sources. So that is student A, okay? Now let's look at student B's sample. So student B is actually writing on topic number 2, which is the old writing wisdom, and in the voice of McKinney Madalena. So this student's writing about Wikipedia, and actually both of the models I give you on this essay topic are on Wikipedia, so you can see how they maybe approach the topic a little bit differently. So again, we have an abstract that's a pretty good link. We've got really strong APA format here. We've got our title, The Pros and Cons of Wikipedia. So we already know that the student's going to be looking at both these pros and these cons, right? So I'm going to go ahead and read the introduction, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to walk through those specific points. Today, with the internet making information even more accessible with each passing day, school assignments like research projects are easier than ever. There's a plethora of knowledge on the web. Having said that, this digital age also brought about websites like Wikipedia that create issues for teachers everywhere. Wikipedia is an encyclopedia-like website that allows users to edit information found on its pages. Neither commissioned nor peer-reviewed, Wikipedia articles are perceived by faculty to contain factual and stylistic errors and omissions. With the ability of anyone to edit articles without having to fact-check beforehand, it is easy to see why teachers are apt to steer students away from such sources during research. Launch 2011 points out that, quote, every year thousands of history teachers nationwide stand before their students describing the evils of using an open source encyclopedia for research projects. The teachers warn of lower grades and a general unfulfilled life for any student who uses Wikipedia in a research bibliography. Having been told my entire career as a student never to use Wikipedia, I decided that I would do research myself to see exactly why Wikipedia is so bad. What I found was that, while obviously not peer-reviewed and not meant to be the only source of information, Wikipedia is still a useful resource during the beginning stages of research. With the misconceptions about Wikipedia and its negative connotations steering students away from its use, the students who skip using Wikipedia altogether are missing out on a potentially valuable jumping-off point for research. Okay. So that was a little bit longer introduction, but again, we sort of start with this general idea that with the digital information age, research is becoming easier, that there's so much knowledge on the web, and then brings it into the context of Wikipedia, and that teachers generally shy students away from Wikipedia. And the student has included some quotes to demonstrate this, as well as a little bit of humor, right? That idea of having an unfulfilled life for using Wikipedia. And then the student brings it down to that prompt that he or she is responding to, that idea that you take an old writing wisdom and that you, using that I, like McKinney Madalena does, that you discuss that old writing wisdom, right? And maybe put an answer to it once and for all, or maybe just problematize it. And so the student puts it in context with his or her own experience, and then comes to a final decision about it. So I'm going to take my highlight off again, and we're going to go through that what, how, why thesis. So the student turns here after presenting this information and says, having been told my entire career, I decided I would research. And then she tells us, or he or she tells us, what I found was that, while obviously not peer-reviewed and not meant to be the only source of information, Wikipedia still has a useful resource during the beginning stages of research. Okay, so this one's formatted, shaped a little bit differently, right? We don't just say Wikipedia is good, right? And then give us a how, kind of like the other one did. But we do have this idea that Wikipedia is a useful resource. And I'm going to go back to my blue there. And then the student tells us that it's useful during the beginning stages of research, right? So there, I'm going to go to my orange. With the misconceptions about Wikipedia and its negative connotation, the students who skip it altogether are really missing out. This is really that why, right? This is like, why is it important that we pick apart Wikipedia and its accuracy? So this I'm going to do in purple, okay? Now, what this student has that the other student did not have is this part right here, while obviously not peer-reviewed and not meant to be the only source of information. So I'm going to do this one in green. I would suggest that this is sort of a counterclaim that the student plans to discuss. So he or she understands that Wikipedia isn't perfect, and he or she wants to develop that idea and kind of talk about why it is not perfect. But then you can see the student wants to end with this really forceful argument that it is useful and it needs to be used. Okay. And if you see how the student starts the essay, problems with Wikipedia, oh, look at that. We're starting with this counterclaim. We're starting with these problems. And then we're eventually going to get into these benefits, right? Pros of Wikipedia. Then the student's going to bring up his or her own reflection and use of Wikipedia, right? And then, of course, we have this conclusion. Now, this student wrote a little bit more. This student actually, what it looks like, made it to 6 pages. So they were a little bit closer. And their project may have been had a little bit different guidelines. I can't remember the exact page limit, but this one was a little bit longer there. So about 6.5 pages. Again, check out the reference list to see if there's anything that might be helpful for you. You can go find that. These students were also Nevada State students, so it's likely that these are sources from either found on Google Scholar or Google or the library databases. Okay, so let's go on and let's look at student C. Now, student C is another writing in the disciplines class. So this student, I think the student might be looking at it generally. Let's look at the thesis or the introduction, abstract. Yeah, it looks like this is just done pretty generally about writing in the disciplines and not necessarily the student's particular major. So again, I'm going to encourage you to take some time to look through this paper. We're not going to go through the whole thesis or the introduction, but you certainly can. You can go through the abstract. You can see what they're doing well, what you might do a little different. But what I want to show you here is really this idea of synthesizing sources. So if you look at your summary, paraphrase, and quotation draft, which I thought a good majority of the class turned in really strong drafts. Some of you had like 5 pages written already with these paragraphs, okay, the way you had broken them down. Some of you had 3 pages written. That's still really good. That's almost halfway done, and all you've done is expand on 5 sources, 1 point for each source. So I was really impressed. I don't think the majority of you will have a hard time getting to that 7 pages. And of course, that's where I'm pushing you. So let's look at so when you did that draft, all you were doing was looking at 1 source per paragraph. You weren't bringing them together on a subject. What I want to do here is look at how a student might bring together multiple sources to talk about one idea. So I'm going to read through this paragraph and then we'll kind of break it down. Having a more specialized knowledge of writing within their own discipline, a student will understand how to apply the skills and knowledge in their own writings in the discipline. A student will be able to understand why they are learning to write in certain formalities rather than simply learning how to do so. And therefore, the student will be able to take more of an empirical approach in their writings by understanding the real-world applications of these skills. Ursula McGowan discussed findings of her studies at the Higher Education Research and Development Conference in 2005 and claimed, quote, overall, our findings suggest that many of our students are overly concerned with the how of academic writing at the expense of the why, and this may inhibit their development as writers within their disciplines. Writing courses that focus on the why of writing rather than the how of writing are more likely to promote meaningful and intellectual engagement. In being able to rationalize and reason the nature and application of specialized academic writing in the discourse, a student will also gain the ability to understand the purpose and further define, reflect, and historicize it. Jessica Yude, assistant professor of English at the City University of New York, writes about the history of English and writing in disciplines in the College English Journal. She mentions in her writing, to reflect on the discipline is not to bookmark its beginning or end, but to experience its practices in the present. A student who is able to apply and practice the discipline-specific formalities of writing learned early in their college education is more likely to be prepared for academic writing in a graduate program and in their professional careers. Okay, So let's go back and look. So it seems like this paragraph from this like first and second sentence is really about this idea of understanding writing in that specialized context and why that's important. And the student first starts by talking about this idea of the why and how. So students want to know how you do something, not why you do something. And what happens, according to this student, the research the student brings up, is that really there isn't great transfer of skills. We just learn how to do it in one class, but not another class, right? Okay, so it inhibits their development as writers. So we've used McGowan to support that idea. But then the student goes on to add that being able to rationalize and reason the nature and application of this writing in a discourse. A student can understand the purpose and further define, reflect, and historicize it. That leads into Yude's discussion of reflection in the discipline. So reflecting on what you're doing, why you're doing it, right? Which is related to what McGowan said. And it also relates to this idea of writing for a specific discipline because it brings these questions up, right? Why do we do it this way in nursing? When we're in this generalized English class like mine, those why conversations might not come up as much because you're all going to be going into different disciplines. So I can't give you one definite why. I can give you many different whys, or maybe even just a general why, but this is what this student is arguing. Again, this doesn't have to be your answer. Your answer can be completely different based on the research that you gather. And then the student ends, after synthesizing, bringing together what McGowan has said and what Yude has said, the student comes to suggest that a student who is able to apply and practice discipline-specific formalities of writing learned early in college is going to be prepared better for academic writing as well as professional writing, okay? So we see how the student made a suggestion of an idea, this idea that specialized knowledge within a discipline is better than not having that specialized knowledge. This idea of the why and the how as supported by McGowan, this idea of how the how can be brought up through reflection as supported by Yude. And then the student really brings this together in this analysis that if we can get students in these specialized or discipline-specific writing classes, we can talk about the why more. Students can reflect on the why more, and that's going to help them really develop as writers, okay? So instead of just giving me a paragraph about what McGowan said, this author synthesizes McGowan's findings and Yude's findings, and then provides some analysis to connect them in context of this entire paper. Again, that's the only paragraph we're going to look at. I'm going to encourage you to flip through this entire essay. This is one of the longer ones that was turned in. If you notice, this student actually ended up writing, let's see, we got to page 13. If you take away the abstract and the title page, that's 11. So the student actually went over the number of pages that you were asked to get to. So it is possible. And again, look at these references. See if there's something that you might be able to borrow. Go find for yourself. Maybe you're going to want to use Yude. That looks like a pretty good one, Writing the Discipline, A Generic History of English Studies, right? Okay, so that is student C. And again, that was a Writing in the Disciplines class. Now we're going to look at our very last, I hope that was big enough for you guys. I just realized I didn't make that one big. Again, you'll be able to go look back and pull up your own copy. So this is our last one. This is student D, and this is another Wikipedia Old Wisdom one. So this is paper prompt number 2. Again, I wanted to include 2 of the same topic to show you the way that 2 students might approach that same topic differently. They might come to different answers. They might come to the same answer, but just organize it differently or use different sources, okay? So it looks like where the other student was doing the pros and cons, it looks like this student is really focusing on these benefits. We've got our abstract. We've got our introduction. You can look for the thesis. Notice we've got some history of Wikipedia. Then we focus on these benefits. Using it as a starting point, which was the other person's main argument. Accuracy of Wikipedia, the way that false information is removed, the language issues, and then the conclusion. So yeah, this person really focuses on those positives. And then of course we have references. some very different references than the other student who did Wikipedia. If you notice, the student got to page 9. So again, this was right at 7 pages. So this was exactly where you guys need to be. So let's look at this paragraph for synthesis again, like we did for the first one. So this is the section on accuracy. So this student is arguing that one of the benefits of Wikipedia is actually that it is accurate, which is often not what we're told. Another reason why students are dissuaded from using wikipedia.org is because the question of accuracy or credibility comes into play. Because anyone with internet access can edit Wikipedia pages and potentially insert false data, it is believed that students should be better safe than sorry and not use Wikipedia at all. Novelist James Purdy agrees that there are some instances where Wikipedia has false information, but one should not assume that all information is false. From research conducted when comparing Wikipedia to other encyclopedias, it is concluded that information from Wikipedia is pretty accurate. A study led by Jim Giles was conducted to see if Wikipedia was as accurate compared to Encyclopedia Britannica. The study contained 42 pairs of different articles from both Wikipedia and Britannica, with the end result being that Wikipedia had an average of approximately 4 inaccuracies, while Britannica had 3, not that much of a difference. Adam R. Brown also concluded that while he reviewed thousands of Wikipedia articles about candidates and elections, he, quote, found that Wikipedia is almost always accurate when a relevant article exists. An additional study was conducted comparing Wikipedia to the German encyclopedia Brockhaus and Microsoft's Encarta. It took 66 entries that were compared, in which experts were asked to rate the articles from a 1 to 5 based on correctness, comprehensibility, and depth. It concluded that, quote, Wikipedia scored full marks for 24 articles as compared to 17 for Brockhaus and 12 for Encarta. Because Wikipedia achieved the highest score, it was deemed more credible than the other 2 sources. In summary, although Wikipedia did make more mistakes than Britannica, it was not that far off from having the same accuracy. Additionally, Wikipedia was determined to be more credible than the German encyclopedia Brockhaus and Microsoft Encarta. With this information in mind, the stereotype of Wikipedia always having false information is false. Although some articles may have falsified information, it does not mean that every article is completely false. Okay, so let's go back up and look at how this paragraph starts. So again, we know from the section heading that it is about the idea of Wikipedia, whether it's accurate or not. And the author transitions us to this idea by suggesting that this is another reason students are dissuaded. So that tells me that probably earlier in this paper, the readers were given other reasons that students are dissuaded. And we know right off the bat in this first sentence that this is going to be about accuracy and credibility, which links us back to our subject heading. This student gives us some context for why we might think that, or why it could happen that there's some inaccuracy on Wikipedia, because anyone can edit it, right? Then the student starts with a quote from, or some information from James Purdy about the idea of Wikipedia having some false information, but not all false. And so James Purdy actually, so that's actually a paraphrase of James Purdy. And then the student gives us a study by Giles that demonstrates that Wikipedia was pretty close in accuracy with Encyclopedia Britannica, probably something that we were all told to use as a source in high school. Another study done by Adam R. Brown that shows Wikipedia is actually more accurate, or almost always accurate, when there is an article published on the web about that topic. And then finally, another study that by Lute, Brendan, Tae-Chi, Scene, Aaron, I'm not sure all these names. Actually, I think these may not all be, some of these may be first names. But you can see this other study that also showed Wikipedia as more accurate than other encyclopedia-like sources. Then the student gives us a little wrap-up of these different studies and what they mean. And finally, the student gives us their own analysis. With this information in mind, the stereotype of Wikipedia always having false information is in fact false itself. And that just because some information could be falsified doesn't mean that all of it is. So that's really that student's conclusion. You can see the shift maybe in the voice from providing this information about these other sources versus the student's conclusion. Again, I'm going to encourage you to look through this paper and see what else is this student's doing well, or maybe what you would do differently. Of course, these papers are not perfect, but they are examples of strong papers on these topics. Again, I apologize that I don't have models for topic number 3, but you can use the same idea of synthesis, the what, how, why thesis, the introduction general to more context to help you write your paper. So these again will be in the modules for week 5. You can go ahead and take a look at them and use them. If you have questions about one of the models or about how you might be able to use it, feel free to email me, okay? I wish everybody luck getting those full drafts done. Remember that you get full credit for turning in that full draft, so I'm gonna really encourage you to have at least 5 pages. I'll consider that a full draft, even though I'm really gonna push you to get to 7 pages. Now remember, your abstract and cover page don't count in that, so you need 5 pages of paragraphing and text, okay? I would also encourage you to go ahead and take a stab at the reference list, because then I can give you some feedback on it. If you don't, you won't get that feedback from me. And it is also one of those things, if you wait until the last minute, you will inevitably put it off so long that you run out of time. So let's not do that. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys have. I'm happy to help. I know Chase is going to be helping us as well, giving you some feedback, and I'll have some instructions a little bit later this week for how to work with your peers on this. So good luck, everyone, and I look forward to reading.